Well, it was a chilly autumn evening here on the lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina Nation, Yithka Nakota First Nation, and more recently the Otipemisiwak Métis. And the Ancestral Science Podcast fam ventured out to Fish Creek here in Calgary, Alberta, built a finicky fire. Our ancestors were less proud of us at that moment, all amongst the shadow of a giant eagle, as we all failed to not get mesmerized or distracted by the fire in front of us. We shared stories about how the pod got started, our favorite episodes and aha moments, and what got us all interested in Indigenous science. So grab your hot chocolate and your flannel jacket, turn on the fireplace channel and light a candle, or maybe get some kindling of your own and build a real fire. And cuddle up for some stories, science, and s'mores with Smoke Talk with the Ancestral Science Podcast fam.
Welcome to the Ancestral Science Podcast. We're gonna chat with the team, the Ancestral Science Podcast fam, and just see how we got here and some cool stuff about all of us. So let's do some little intros first, and then we can go from there. Emil, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everybody. My name is Emil Starlight, and I own Limelight Multimedia, which is a multimedia company business that I do photography, videography, graphic design, website design, audio production.
What don't you do?
Oh, and sound systems. I rent out sound systems and do PAs and stuff like that for audio visual. So I also do like projector screens, but I haven't done that in a long time because it's a hassle to set up. So I try to just keep it to, if I'm doing audio video, just try to keep it to audio.
Cool. That's why everything looks and sounds so awesome here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I edit this podcast.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Emil.
Yes.
Alex.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. I come from Wesquissy Peak in Manitoba. I've been a part of this podcast for 4 or 5 months now. Something. I don't know. It's been long.
It seems longer.
Seems longer than that. Yes.
In a good way.
I hope so. Yeah. Yes, I help with the marketing, the social media, advertisements, just trying to get our name out there, as well as when we're shooting, I'm production assistant, Scapios, that sort of thing. So that's my role at the podcast so far.
Oh, and I'm from Tsuut'ina Nation. Sorry.
You're good. You're good.
We're just rolling here. My name is Corey Miko Kahiso and Nasigasen. Get to be the host and all that good stuff of the podcast here. We'll talk about the origins of that maybe in a bit. But my mother's family's from up north in Big Prairie, and just excited to chat with lots of different people from different nations, different communities, from Turtle Island beyond, about science and the depth of science within Indigenous knowledges. So, and that's how this all started.
Well said.
Well said.
And where are we now?
Where are we now? This is actually the second time I've been here. It's here with Rob last year, I think. But we're in, you know this place better than me.
Fish Creek Park, just off of the Hull parking lot is where we are. Yeah.
Come find us and say hi. No.
Yeah.
We finally got the fire going, which is lovely. Look at that. We probably should have offered tobacco earlier, but we got
I think that's why we struggled.
Everything is so dry, and for some reason it wouldn't start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be just a chill conversation between all of us, so everyone can get to know the team and what we do. So.
Okay, I want to start by asking a question.
Yeah,
Corey, why did you start this podcast? Or what made you start?
I will say it was Casey Eaglespeaker from Ghana, who has been gifting me lots of knowledge and supporting me in my journey on this Indigenous science journey I've been on for many years now. And I work with a lot of teachers and students and communities, and a lot of this knowledge isn't known, and there's not a lot of resources to access this type of knowledge. And Casey always says to me, and to many people, knowledge isn't knowledge unless it's shared, and especially in a way that's authentic and follows protocols of oral teachings. And this was a way that can be done, where we can talk to elders, knowledge keepers, Indigenous scientists, and record this in a good way through protocols, and to share the knowledge. And even a lot of, in the show notes, you'll see a ton of resources that people can find out more information and learn about how to talk about this knowledge in a good way. And it's a good starting point for a lot of people. It especially shows the diversity of this knowledge. And I think often with many Indigenous teachings, there's the perception that it's pan-Indigenous, that it's similar everywhere, which is not true. There are similarities, but this podcast shows how specific communities and even elders share scientific knowledge.
I have a follow-up to that.
Yes, please.
So with us being in the second season, having a lot of episodes that we've done and that we're planning, where do you see this going? The whole podcast.
What is the dream?
Yeah. Well, like what's where do you see this ending up? We're so local right now, but what does that look like in a year or two from now?
I'd love to have, ancestral science podcast teams in different places that are, working with elders and knowledge keepers in those places. And, we're lucky that we have a big community here and beyond that we can record with, often, sometimes in person, sometimes not. But I think it'd be really cool to have, to support other Indigenous people and to be able to do the same thing in other places. And there's a lot of science just in making each episode, with the videography, with the audio, with how do you work with the land and protocols of the community. So I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to learn how to do this, but then to support other people and communities to do that as well. That's the dream.
That's the dream.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, we know this way, we're learning this way, but what does it look like overseas? What does it look like in Australia? What does that look like? Like all over the world, just that's so fascinating what that looks like.
I think we were talking about that when we were writing some of the grants, and wouldn't it be cool to, I have a lot of connections, in Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, and in the southern states, and what if we went to video places and talked to those people in person, which would be great, but then also that's not sustainable. Maybe we can do that and start teaching people in those locations and in those communities how to do this and to make it more sustainable. Or they can learn too.
Actually, I kind of wanted to go back a little bit because I was just thinking as we were talking, why science? Where, at what point did you learn that our culture and science were one and the same and that you wanted to, take this path?
That's such a good question. That's a really good question.
Thank you. That is a good question. It was very late in my life. I did not connect with science or math when I was in school. I failed math 30 twice. And now the word math is in my PhD, so you can do anything. But it was when I was doing my master's. I was studying at the Institute of Education in London, England, and to pick a specialty. And there was a moment when I came across this diagram in a book, and it was showing the body tally counting systems out of Papua New Guinea. And there's, if you know Papua New Guinea, there's 800 different dialects of languages in this really small like island, and a lot of the reason for that is because of geography. There's lots of like dense forests, cliffs, fast running rivers and whatnot, and they segregated people. So languages are similar, but also different. And it wasn't just the languages that are different, also the counting systems, and we count on our 10 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
That's base 10. But many communities from many communities around the world that use their entire body to count. In Papua New Guinea, like you demonstrate. We have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, your entire face. It goes up to 26. It includes, let's say that there's people that identify as male, maybe have a couple more numbers in some communities than others. But it's using your entire body to count. And it made me think about how, I used to count on my fingers when I was a kid, and we weren't allowed to. And I would like secretly do that behind my back. But why don't we use our entire body to count? And as I was looking more into it, looking at how, you're actually, if you're thinking of trading between communities, you're trading and you're actually connecting with your numbers, counting your body with the other communities. Originally, many of these counting systems didn't have oral words connected to the numbers. So you're actually physically connecting with people to trade, to count, and then you're translating between like maybe base 26 to a base 32 number system, which is a ton of math in itself. It's like, how do we translate how we talk about base 10 to base 32, which is computer language, right? And connects with touch, connects with community. And then if you think of numbers like the numbers connected to your belly button, there's probably a really deep story connected to that.
Mm-hmm.
That number would represent your belly button, but also maybe connections to your matrilineal line, connections to birth stories. So it's more than just a number. It's not just this abstract idea of which I learn numbers. I think many people, you just memorize it, you memorize equations, whatnot, but it connected to stories to body the community. So it made me think, well, it's like that in Papua New Guinea, it must be like that other places.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of just started my journey of coming back here to Turtle Island and to reconnect with the communities here. And that was, one of my first conversations with Casey Eaglespeaker was about numbers in the TV, as we talked about in a previous episode with Casey. And that was my first conversation about that on these lands. And I didn't know, even when I started my PhD here, even what that meant or what it could look like. And if honestly, I'm like, is there Indigenous mathematics? Is there cultural mathematics? At that point, many people called it ethnomathematics, which is also a weird terminology, but so it just kind of snowballed. And here we are today.
Yeah, the origin story.
I know, that's so crazy. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm just like thinking about counting my toes and that's 20 right there.
On Turtle Island, a lot of communities have traditionally base 20, your fingers and your toes, especially up north. Think of how significant those extremities are, and really connecting with that.
Mm.
It's like, how many? Tell a story. How many toes did I freeze off today when I was trying to start the fire? No, but.
And then. Sorry, I have another question.
No, go ahead.
Just the
asking each other questions, but
I know. I'm just like, well, just because we stress the significance of citing your sources.
Yeah.
And I really like how you do that. You say that before every episode. What is the importance of that? Where you see it?
Yeah, let's think about in global Western science. Or any way that when you're in an education system where you're writing something and it's not yours, it's not your thought, you're told you have to cite your sources. There's systems for that. How do you do it? You do it through Chicago style, EP, whatnot. But we don't do that orally. And it was only until recently, and there's new guidelines for research and like writing styles where, it's more accepted to cite sources orally. And I think it's really important, especially with Indigenous knowledge, because, you know, that, like I always say, it's not my knowledge. I didn't learn it. I learned it from someone else. And that's to me, that's peer review. You do peer review at the academic institution where you're studying your sources, or, you know, there's a community of like-minded people that are studying the same thing that, you know, they review your stuff. Well, in our community okay, I know that person talked to that person, or I can, if I cite one of the elders that, you know, has taught me something, somebody can go to them and be like, did you teach Corey this? Or, and then, you know, that's that connection to that person and to that land. Again, that goes back to making sure that, you know, that knowledge is connected to land. Like a story about a cottonwood tree here on like the Treaty 7 lands is probably very different than a story about a cottonwood tree maybe up north or out west. So
True.
it's allowing for that relationality and that specific land-based teaching and connecting to a specific elder knowledge keeper.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it, because like my dad, he's a traditional practitioner. He doesn't call himself a medicine man, but he's a practitioner.
Do
My
other
uncle,
people call him a medicine man?
I don't know what but he's along that line, and him and my uncle, who's like a pipe holder and sweat keeper, they both talked about, it's funny, like them coming from that background, they talk about that, how some people, like, I don't know if you remember back a few, like 10 years ago, maybe 12, there's that group, that new age group that had a sweat down in Navajo territory.
Yeah. I thought we were just talking about that. I thought that was like 6, 7 years ago. It's like 2.
I think it was like 10.
Okay.
But see, what they did was they went to, so what I'm saying is, the reason this is important, because it's for people's safety.
Yeah.
When you take something without permission, or you learn something and then you take it as that was a teaching that it's yours now, you have to learn to ask if it's okay for you to do it. And there's protocols and there's ways to go about doing these practices that, that you have to do in order to do them. Because those people, how many people died in that?
Yeah, it was a sweat lodge that someone put on that did not follow protocols. That was, you know, people got hurt, people died.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So I guess that's what I'm saying is, if you're wondering why we say that in the podcast, that's the reason. It's for your own safety.
It's a responsibility too. We have a responsibility to that knowledge, you know, and that's, you know, when that knowledge is shared with us, it's shared with us because we have been trusted with it, so that we can pass it on in a good way, right? So that and therefore whoever's listening to it can pass it on in a good way. So we are trusting all of the audience. Please do this in a good way.
Well, even if you think about it, in the science world, everyone knows who invented something, who created something. It's always cited. It's always like,
patented.
Yes, this is the person that started something or discovered something, you could say. Why would we not do the same?
Yeah, and it's like, it often feels weird to cite orally, you know, but it's, you know, we should be doing that all the time.
Absolutely. Yep.
As I roast the sacred microphone. So, Emil, why did you want to be a part of this?
I'm a big sci-fi nerd, as you guys,
No one knows that.
as you guys may have noticed.
Breaking news.
If you haven't seen our trailer, go watch it now.
Yeah.
So I've always been interested in that, and I've always been my head's always been in the stars. But no, like, you know, I've always loved science fiction, the movies. I know we probably can't say, but
All
you know, the
good
television shows. And so it was always kind of like, I was always curious about it. Always curious about that. And like you said, I was never in like I was like, I think I finally made math 30, but yeah, science and math were like my worst subjects. Just I've always been kind of like this wild kid. And you know, when I was a kid, when I first started going to school, I scared the kindergarten teachers because they thought something was wrong with me mentally, because I was seeing my relatives that weren't there. And it's almost like I remember, you know, like really seeing them. I'm like, oh, my grandma's here, hey! You know, just really excited, and nobody was there. And like the teachers were like, oh, something's wrong with this. So I've always been kind of like that. You know, my mind has always been somewhere else. And so with this, like when we're, especially on the first episode with Hal, when we're, you know, you were talking about like quantum, yeah, portals, and, you know, ways of being, and just like, and, you know, I was just like, that got me more interested, because I was like, oh, our ways are already like that. And then the more people you talk to, the more I'm just like, you know, the more it says, you know, this is true. Especially with, you know, especially with science, you have to make sure, because science is like math, you know, the formulas have to add up. And, or I don't know if they do or not, but
It's a balance. Formula is balance.
yeah,
So you have to balance either side, right? So it's
yeah.
or not.
So the more and more that happens, I'll try one of these. The more and more that happens, the more and more it tells me, you know, we know more than we think.
Yeah.
And too, it's like comforting, because like a lot of stuff in my brain, in my thinking, I'll you know, I'll think something, and then as soon as I hear it on the podcast, I'm like, oh, so, you know, so I am right, you know, I'm not crazy, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's like that. It's almost like global Western science is just trying to catch up of like what a way of how our ancestors learned about the world around them and how to thrive and survive on these lands. And through, you know, scientific, like global Westerners, we define scientific ways of observation and experience, but also using spirit and using that intuitive sense and you know, predicting, you know, upcoming, or I guess current, like pandemics, and you know, there's a ton of examples of knowledges that are, quote, not rational, or not, you know, cannot be replicated and are so subjective. You know, is what I'm sure all of us have experienced in a ceremony or a sweat lodge or whatnot. And that's, you know, science is it's how are we understanding the world around us, and to limit those methods of how we understand it through ones that are generalizable, objective, replicable, doesn't apply when it's so specific to ourselves and our experience. And even not so, you know, there's ceremonies where many people have a similar experience, but
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, what about you? Why did you want to be a part of this?
Yeah, well, my story is a little similar. I was not great at science whatsoever. Actually, a little bit of a story. Just working my way into it.
Yeah.
In my grade 12 year, I was passing all my courses except science. I think I had a 38% going into my final, and a teacher told me you basically have to like ace this thing to pass. And or I was going back for another year.
Yeah.
And all my friends are moving on, and I don't want that, right? And so I don't know how, man. I don't know how I did it, but I got like an 86% on my final, and then I jumped up to a 54, and I just barely squeaked by. But
Nice.
so I was never really good at science. It was kind of a foreign topic to my mind, but I think I'm quite curious, and I really want to I want to understand, and I want to know more. And so one thing about science, if you kind of change your perspective, is it's not just about figuring out formulas or understanding how something works. It's the mindset is a pursuit of continuing that learning. I'm not explaining this well at all, but I wanted that's science to me is continuing to learn and to figure things out and to be a part of things. And this is something that was completely like, it didn't exist to me before I even heard about this podcast. So and Indigenous led and really focused on hearing from community to learn about things. That's something that drew me in instantly. And not one time have we ever been like, okay, we figured it out. We're good. Let's go to a new topic. It's always like, is there more? What else can you share with us?
Yeah.
It's always learning. And it's just, I love that. I love that. That's why I have so many questions during like episodes.
I noticed that. I was like, you're really inquisitive.
You mean I want this sacred marshmallow stick?
I'm okay for right now.
Yeah, I'm good. That was
Really good
rich.
though. Yeah. Putting it nicely, yeah.
Sugar break. So would you say that when you were in school, both of you, like was there ever a time when you saw yourself in science or math? Like connected personally or culturally or like anything?
Oh, that's a hard hitter.
I asked this question to my teachers, the teachers I work with. And it's so funny, this one time, it was last year, but not, I had a teacher from Greece. She's like, yeah, of course. Right? Lots of formulas. But yeah, it's interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about that before. I from what I can think about, there might have been, but I can't recall anything. The way our science is taught is very, we weren't included in that conversation. And so, no, I mean, maybe, but I just can't think of anything.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, where I see myself in science, it had to do when I learned, when my uncle told me where mushrooms came from, because the Tsuut'ina word for mushrooms has to do with a star, or like coming from the stars. And I was like, why is that? And he said, well, that's where they came from. They're not from Earth. And I'm like, oh. And so it was like, so there was that, he said, and then also too, then just kind of putting the pieces together and talking about, people keep talking about star people, coming to this world. And, I'm just like, oh, that's where we came from. So it's like, so that's, I think for me is when I kind of put it together, when I was like, or when I seen that myself in science,
Yeah.
was that story.
Being
or
connected to the
that
stars.
telling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Connection to stars.
Yeah, it's interesting that math and science used to be so, like, that's the origin is human created, human centered, in that sense of humans learning about themselves and survival in the land and asking questions and being inquisitive. But it's become so disconnected purposefully from humans, from the land, disconnected from how we learn. And it's almost like, really, math and science, it is purposefully, quote, culturally neutral. And there's always that conversation, like, no, there's no math or there's no culture within, especially mathematics. And I talked to a lot of mathematicians about that too. Really pushing back on, I purposefully do not bring culture into the classroom so that it is for everybody. But if you think about when you're in school, in like middle school, high school, junior high, and think about the math problems that you did. And think about the topics of those problems. How much money, you're learning addition, subtraction with money, with always more is better. Like, what is that? It's always about yards and fences. Like, calculate this area of a fence. Think about how that connection with colonization and ownership of land and segregation between, this is mine, this is yours, and, or even like, what is the math problem that you remember from school? Because I promise, it's always the same one that everyone's like traumatized from.
Oh, when does train A get to train B meet the same spot at this distance? And,
it's always, everybody answers the exact same way. Like, this train's going this speed, and and then they're going to collide at some point. First of all, why are we talking about trains? Second, it's about speed. Again, the harms of trains and railroads,
colonization,
absolutely. And then there's the unrealistic problems also of, like, if you have 5,000 watermelons and then you want to put 6,000 of those onto a truck, it just completely unrealistic topics. And so, let's be honest, like, European focused. About commodification, about wealth and land ownership. And it's weird when you think about that. So it can't be neutral. Science can't be neutral because there's an underlying perspective that's
totally, yeah, absolutely.
I know. At one point, didn't you say, "Don't look at the fire"? Oh no, you said, "Don't look at the fire."
Yeah,
and then we all just like. At one point, we're just all looking at the fire.
What was your favorite episode so far?
Of this? Oh. See, it's hard because I want to say the first one, but then I want to say the one I was in. Yeah, the stories.
Quantum entanglement ghosts.
Yeah. I think for that one too, like, even editing was fun doing that one.
The quantum entanglement ghost one.
Yeah, just because I got to play a little bit and
added some
sound effects.
Sounds.
Yeah,
that's good.
I would have to say the same one, because that's something that never gets talked about. Like, those two topics are like, people look at them as separate things, and it's just I don't know. I totally was super, like, not knowledgeable on the scientific stuff, but it was just so crazy to hear it all and imagine it and sit there and just listen, and it was amazing.
Okay, we're just going to go tend to our fire and maybe find some more smokes so we can continue to talk. Just kidding. Maybe. We'll be back for more smoke talk on the next episode, so stock up on your s'mores and some marshmallows and whatever you need, and come back to the next episode when we get into science fiction and Indigenous science fiction, maybe dreams about future episodes, and the importance of protocols and science. So see you soon.